My name is Sarah, and I'm about to tell you how my aunt, the woman who raised me after my parents died, systematically stole my entire inheritance while I was serving my country in Afghanistan. What I thought was family loyalty and love turned out to be the most calculated financial betrayal I could never have imagined, orchestrated by someone who had been planning this theft for over a decade. I should have known something was wrong when Aunt Patricia insisted on handling all of my grandmother's estate paperwork while I was deployed. For our entire relationship, she'd always claimed to be terrible with legal stuff and would ask me to help her with everything from insurance forms to tax documents. Patricia volunteering to manage a complex estate should have been my first warning sign. "Oh, sweetie, you have enough to worry about over there," she'd said during one of our video calls, her voice dripping with the same maternal concern that had comforted me since I was 13 years old. "Grandma Rose would want you focused on staying safe, not dealing with lawyers and paperwork." The comment about staying safe should have been another red flag. Yes, I was in a dangerous deployment zone, but I'd specifically told her I wanted to be involved in settling Grandma's affairs. She'd been more than a grandmother to me. She'd been my mother figure after my parents died in that plane crash when I was in 8th grade. Patricia was right about one thing, though. Grandma Rose would have wanted me to focus on my mission. After all, she was the one who'd encouraged me to join the army in the first place, telling me that military service would give me discipline, purpose, and a secure future. I was so naive. The inheritance theft started innocently enough. Patricia called me 2 weeks after Grandma's funeral, which I'd missed due to my deployment schedule, claiming she'd found the will in Grandma's bedroom safe. "It's exactly what we expected," she told me over a crackling international phone connection. "The house goes to you, the savings account goes to you, and there's a small amount for me to cover funeral expenses. She always said you were like the daughter she never had." Her voice carried that familiar warmth that had gotten me through countless difficult nights as a grieving teenager. Patricia had stepped in when I had no one else, taking me into her modest apartment and making sure I graduated high school despite my trauma. But slowly, things started to feel off. When I asked for copies of the will and other estate documents, Patricia always had excuses for delays. The lawyer was busy. The probate court was backed up. The documents were being processed. For 6 months, I received nothing but promises and explanations. "Don't you trust me, Sarah?" she'd ask whenever I pressed for documentation. "Haven't I always taken care of you?" The guilt trips were effective. Patricia had sacrificed a lot to raise me. She'd never married, never had children of her own, and had devoted 15 years of her life to making sure I had everything I needed. If she said the paperwork was being handled, then it must be. The red flags became impossible to ignore when I tried to contact Grandma's lawyer directly. I'd found the law firm's information in some old documents Grandma had given me years earlier. When I called from base, the receptionist seemed confused by my inquiry. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any active cases for a Rose Martinez estate," the receptionist told me. "That's impossible," I said, my heart starting to race. "My Aunt Patricia told me you were handling my grandmother's will." There was a pause. "Ma'am, we haven't handled any estate matters for anyone by that name in the past year." I hung up feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. If Grandma's regular lawyer wasn't handling the estate, then who is? That night, I called Patricia from my barracks, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hey, I tried to call Mr. Henderson's office today," I said casually. "They said they weren't handling Grandma's estate?" Patricia's response came too quickly, too rehearsed. "Oh, sweetie, didn't I tell you? Mr. Henderson retired last year. We had to switch to a new firm. Everything's being handled by Morrison and Associates now." The explanation sounded reasonable, but something about her tone felt off. In 15 years of living with Patricia, I'd learned to recognize when she was nervous about something. "Can you give me their contact information?" I asked. "Of course, dear. I'll email it to you tomorrow." The email never came. When I called Patricia 3 days later to ask about the contact information, she claimed she'd sent it, but that overseas email was unreliable. When I asked her to send it again, she promised she would, but again, nothing arrived. The pattern continued for weeks. Every time I asked for documentation or contact information, Patricia had explanations for why it wasn't available yet. The new lawyer was out of town, the probate court was experiencing delays, the documents were still being processed. It was my friend Jessica who finally opened my eyes to what was really happening. Jessica had been my best friend since basic training, and she'd met Patricia during one of our video calls. When I mentioned my frustrations with the estate paperwork, Jessica's response was immediate and blunt. "Sarah, that sounds like bullshit," she said during one of our late-night conversations. "My dad's a lawyer, and estate cases don't take this long without major complications. Something's not right." But Patricia raised me. I protested. She wouldn't steal from me. Jessica's expression was gentle but firm. "Honey, the people closest to us are often the ones in the best position to hurt us. They know our weaknesses, our trust patterns, our blind spots." Her words haunted me for days. Could Patricia really be lying to me? The woman who'd attended every school play, helped me with homework, and cried when I left for basic training, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Using the base's computer lab, I started researching public records for Grandma Rose's property. What I found made my blood run cold. According to county records, Grandma's house had been sold 3 months earlier for $340,000. The seller was listed as Patricia Martinez, but there was no indication that she'd inherited the property legally. I dug deeper into public records and found even more disturbing information. Bank accounts that should have been frozen pending probate had been closed and emptied. Insurance policies had been cashed out. Even Grandma's car had been sold. All of it had been done by Patricia, claiming to be the sole beneficiary of the estate. But I had something Patricia didn't know about: a copy of Grandma's real will that she'd given me 2 years earlier during one of my leave visits. I'd forgotten about it until now, but Grandma had pulled me aside during Christmas dinner and handed me a sealed envelope. "This is a copy of my will, Mija," she'd said in her heavily accented English. "I'm giving it to you because I want you to know what I've planned. Patricia doesn't know about this copy, and I want to keep it that way." At the time, I'd thought it was just one of Grandma's paranoid moments. She'd always been suspicious of people's motives, probably because she'd grown up poor and had to fight for everything she achieved. I'd tucked the envelope into my military documents and forgotten about it until now. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope and read the will that Grandma had actually written. The document was clear and legally witnessed. I was indeed the primary beneficiary, inheriting the house, her savings accounts, her life insurance policies, and her investment portfolio. Patricia was left with $10,000 and some jewelry, a generous amount, but nowhere near the total value of the estate. But the most shocking part was a handwritten note Grandma had attached to the will. "Sarah, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me, and Patricia is probably trying to convince you that she's the rightful heir. She's been pressuring me for years to change my will in her favor, claiming that she deserves more because she raised you. But you are my blood, and you are the one I want to have my life's work. Don't let her guilt you into giving up what's rightfully yours. She's not as innocent as she pretends to be." The note was dated just 6 months before Grandma's death, suggesting she'd suspected Patricia might try something like this. I felt like I was going to throw up. The woman who'd raised me, who I'd trusted completely, had been systematically stealing my inheritance while I was thousands of miles away serving my country. But I needed more evidence before I could confront her. Over the next 2 weeks, I used every free moment to investigate further. I contacted banks, insurance companies, and the county clerk's office. Slowly, a picture emerged of elaborate fraud. Patricia had forged documents claiming to be the executor of the estate. She'd created fake probate court papers and even forged what appeared to be a different will, one that left everything to her, The forged will was crude but effective. She'd used Grandma's signature from old Christmas cards and birthday letters to create what looked like legal documents. To someone who didn't know better, they would have appeared legitimate. But Patricia had made several mistakes. The witnesses listed on her forged will included people who had died before Grandma did. The notary stamp was from a notary whose license had been suspended. And the legal language was inconsistent with how wills were actually written in our state. She'd been counting on me never seeing the actual documents, never questioning her authority as my caring aunt. I was 10,000 miles away with limited communication options, but I knew I had to act fast. Every day that passed was another day Patricia could hide assets or destroy evidence. That I contacted a military legal assistance attorney on base, who helped me understand my options. With the evidence I'd gathered and Grandma's original will, I had a strong case for inheritance fraud. The attorney helped me file papers with the local court system to freeze all remaining assets and challenge Patricia's claimed authority over the estate. We also contacted local law enforcement to report the forgery and fraud, but I still had to confront Patricia directly. I waited until my scheduled video call with her, gathering my courage and evidence. When her familiar face appeared on the screen, I almost lost my nerve. She looked exactly like the caring aunt who'd raised me, tired, worried, and genuinely happy to see me. "Hi, sweetie," she said warmly. "How are you holding up? You look stressed." "I am stressed, Patricia," I said, using her name instead of Aunt Pat for the first time in years. "I'm stressed because I found out you've been lying to me about Grandma's estate." Her face changed instantly. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully. "I mean that you sold Grandma's house without my knowledge. I mean that you emptied her bank accounts and cashed out her insurance policies. I mean that you forged legal documents to steal my inheritance." Patricia's mask slipped completely. Gone was the caring aunt, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "You were never supposed to find out," she said flatly. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Despite all my evidence and suspicions, part of me had still hoped there was an innocent explanation. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I trusted you completely. I loved you." Patricia's expression became almost pitying. "Sarah, you're 28 years old with a steady military income and your whole life ahead of you. I'm 45 with no savings, no retirement, and no prospects. Who needs that money more? It wasn't your money to take. Your grandmother was a bitter old woman who never appreciated what I sacrificed to raise you." Patricia snapped. "I gave up my entire adult life taking care of her ungrateful granddaughter, and she was going to leave me pocket change while giving you hundreds of thousands of dollars you don't even need. You gave up your life?" "Patricia, I was grateful every single day. I thanked you constantly." "Gratitude doesn't pay bills," she said coldly. "Gratitude doesn't fund retirement. Your grandmother should have recognized what I'd done for this family. So you decided to steal it instead." Patricia's laugh was bitter and humorless. "I decided to take what I'd earned. 28 years of taking care of that ungrateful old woman and her traumatized granddaughter should be worth something." The revelation that she'd resented caring for me all those years was almost worse than the theft itself. "And what were you going to tell me when I came home?" I asked. "That the estate was smaller than we'd thought. That there were debts and taxes we hadn't known about. That by the time everything was settled, there wasn't much left." Her plan had been to gradually reveal a fictional financial collapse, making me believe that Grandma had died with little to leave behind. "The worst part," Patricia continued, "is that you would have believed me. You trusted me so completely that you never would have questioned it." She was right, and we both knew it. If I hadn't stumbled upon the public records by accident, if I hadn't found Grandma's real will, I would have accepted whatever story Patricia told me. "There's just one problem with your brilliant plan," I said. Echoing the words I'd heard in so many dramatic movies, Patricia looked at me with amusement, clearly expecting me to break down or beg for mercy. Instead, I held up the legal documents I'd prepared. "I have Grandma's real will," I announced. "The one she gave me 2 years ago. And I've already contacted the authorities about your forgery and fraud." Her face went completely white. "You can't. That's impossible. I also have copies of all the financial records showing what you stole, when you stole it, and how you forged documents to do it." Patricia stared at me through the computer screen, finally realizing that her perfect crime had just collapsed completely. "Sarah, you don't understand," she said desperately. "I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. You owe me. I owe you nothing," I interrupted. "You made the choice to raise me, and I was grateful for it. But that didn't give you the right to steal from me." "The money is already spent," she said, trying a different approach. "I used it to pay off debts, to secure my future. You can't get it back now. Then you'll go to prison for theft and fraud," I said simply. "The choice is yours." Patricia's composure cracked completely. "You can't do this to me. I'm the only family you have left. You stopped being my family the moment you decided to steal from me." The call ended with Patricia screaming accusations and threats, but I'd heard enough. 3 days later, she was arrested at her apartment while trying to shred financial documents. The investigation revealed an even deeper pattern of financial fraud than I'd initially discovered. Patricia had been forging Grandma's signature on checks for months before her death, gradually draining her accounts. She'd also taken out credit cards in Grandma's name and run up massive debts that she'd planned to claim as estate obligations. The total amount of theft was over $400,000, money that Grandma had saved over decades of careful living and smart investing. Patricia was sentenced to 5 years in prison for inheritance fraud, forgery, and identity theft. At her sentencing hearing, she was required to listen to a victim impact statement I'd written from overseas. In it, I told her that while she'd succeeded in stealing my inheritance, she'd also taught me the difference between family and blood relatives. Family are the people who support and protect you. Blood relatives are just people who happen to share your DNA. "You had every opportunity to be my family," I wrote. "Instead, you chose to be a criminal who happened to be related to me." During my next leave, I returned home to begin the process of recovering what remained of my inheritance. Most of the liquid assets were gone, spent on Patricia's debts and lifestyle, but I was able to recover about $80,000 through asset seizure and insurance claims. More importantly, I learned that several of Grandma's friends had suspected Patricia was up to something in the months before Grandma's death. They'd witnessed Patricia pressuring Grandma to change her will and had seen her taking items from the house without permission. "We tried to warn your grandmother," one neighbor told me, "but she didn't want to believe her own daughter could be stealing from her." The irony was that Patricia wasn't even Grandma's biological daughter. She was my father's sister who'd maintained a relationship with Grandma after my parents died. She'd position herself as the dutiful daughter while systematically planning to rob the woman who'd treated her like family. When I finished my deployment and returned home permanently, I used what remained of my inheritance as a down payment on a small house. It wasn't the financial security Grandma had intended to leave me, but it was something. More importantly, I'd learned valuable lessons about trust, family, and the importance of verification, even with people you love. 2 years later, I received a letter from Patricia in prison. It was filled with excuses about financial desperation, apologies for making mistakes, and requests for money for her commissary account. I read the letter once, then donated it to the fraud prevention seminar I'd started giving to military personnel about protecting their finances while deployed. Patricia's letter became a perfect example of how manipulators continued trying to exploit their victims even after being caught and punished. On the 3rd anniversary of Grandma's death, I visited her grave for the first time since returning from deployment. I brought flowers and a photo of the house I'd bought with the recovered inheritance money. "I'm sorry I wasn't here to protect you from her," I said to the headstone. "But I promise you, your sacrifice wasn't completely wasted. I learned from this, And I'm using that knowledge to help other people avoid the same betrayal. Standing there in the quiet cemetery, I felt grateful for Grandma's foresight in giving me that copy of her will. Without it, Patricia's theft would have been perfect and complete. I also felt grateful that I'd learned the truth about Patricia while I was still young enough to rebuild. Some people don't discover family financial fraud until they're older and have fewer options for recovery. Patricia was released from prison after serving 3 years of her sentence. She sent me several letters asking for help getting back on her feet and claiming she'd learned her lesson. I never responded to any of them. The last I heard, she was living in a different state under supervised probation, working minimum wage jobs, and struggling with the permanent consequences of her criminal record. Sometimes I wonder if she ever truly understood the magnitude of what she'd done, not just the theft, but the destruction of the only real family relationship she had left. But then I remember her cold words during our final video call. Gratitude doesn't pay bills. Someone who could reduce 15 years of raising a grieving child to a financial transaction was never really family to begin with. She was just someone who'd been waiting for the right opportunity to cash out. Today, I'm married to a fellow veteran who knows my entire story and has helped me build new definitions of trust and family. We have a 1-year-old daughter who will grow up knowing the difference between people who love you and people who use you. My inheritance from Grandma wasn't what I'd expected, but it taught me lessons worth more than money. Verify everything, trust carefully, and remember that the people closest to you are often in the best position to hurt you if they choose to. Patricia taught me that blood doesn't make family, character does. And character is something she never had. Despite 15 years of pretending otherwise, my inheritance script.